the waters off the coast of Japan in early 1945. During combat operations, an American F4U Corsair was discarded due to an engine failure. As the jet struck the chilly Pacific, the pilot ejected. Japanese patrol boats gathered on the floating wreckage in a matter of hours. One of the most important intelligence opportunities of the last few months of the conflict would be what they were able to retrieve. Japanese pilots had been flying alongside this American combatant over the Solomon Islands, Rabaul, the Philippines, the waters off the coast of Japan in early 1945. During combat operations, an American F4U Corsair was discarded due to an engine failure. As the jet struck the chilly Pacific, the pilot ejected. Japanese patrol boats gathered on the floating wreckage in a matter of hours. One of the most important intelligence opportunities of the last few months of the conflict would be what they were able to retrieve. Japanese pilots had been flying alongside this American combatant over the Solomon Islands, Rabaul, the Philippines, and by studying this fighter, they would learn things about manufacturing accuracy, material science, and design philosophy that would challenge their preconceived notions about their own abilities. The Corsair that Japanese salvage crews recovered was a pinnacle of American fighter development. Created in 1938 to satisfy the strict requirements of the U.S. Navy, the F4U had transformed from a radical idea into one of the most dreaded combat aircraft of the war thanks to its recognizable inverted gull-wing, enormous Pratt & Whitney R-28,000 double Wasp engine, and revolutionary. It was easily identifiable due to its performance characteristics. More significantly, it had struck a balance between speed, firepower, range, and structural strength, something Japanese aviation found difficult to equal. The Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics requested a fighter aircraft that could reach speeds of over 400 miles per hour in level flight in 1938, which marked the beginning of the Corsair. Just the specification was groundbreaking. The majority of combat planes at the time had trouble reaching 350 miles per hour. The Navy required a full package, not simply speed. Strong armor, a 1,000-mile range, low stalling speed for carrier operations, and bomb-carrying capability. Chance Vort's answer was bold. Rex Biesel, the chief designer, and his group made a decision to base their aircraft on the Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double Wasp, the biggest and most potent engine on the market. With 2,000 horsepower, its 18-cylinder, two-row radial engine was almost twice as powerful as the majority of modern fighters. They created the largest propeller ever installed on a fighter aircraft, measuring 13 feet 4 inches in diameter. In order to harness this power, the engineering problem arose right away. How can such a huge propeller have ground clearance while still preserving structural effectiveness for carrier operations? The solution became the most unique aspect of the Corsair. Instead of employing typical straight wings, Bissel's team designed an inverted gull-wing design. When viewed from the front, the wings formed a characteristic M shape as they inclined downward from the fuselage before leveling out. This arrangement gave propeller clearance and permitted comparatively small landing gear. Additionally, ideal aerodynamic conditions were produced by the anhedral angle where the wing and fuselage met, reducing drag. Lyman Abelard Jr., VA's chief test pilot, piloted the prototype XF4U-1 from the plant airport in Stratford, Connecticut on May 29, 1940. During a test flight between Stratford and Hartford on October 1, 1940, the XF4U-1 made history as the first American fighter with a single engine to reach the 405 miles per hour ground speed mark with tailwind help. At 23,500 feet, the aircraft's real highest level flight speed was 378 miles per hour. Still, that was a remarkable performance for 1940. In late 1942, production of the F4U-1 Corsair started to reach operational units. On February 12, 1943, Marine Fighter Squadron 5 MF-124 received the first combat-ready aircraft to deploy to Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The Corsair made an unsettling combat debut. On February 14, 1943, during the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, as it came to be called, the first engagement for Corsairs was devastating. While Japanese defenders only lost one Zero fighter, 9 American aircraft, including 2 Corsairs, several P-38 Lightnings, P-40 Warhawks, and bombers, were lost. Due to the extreme 9-to-1 loss ratio in Japan's advantage, daytime bombing operations against Bougainville were halted while tactical reevaluation was conducted. This battle showed that success could not be assured by superior technology alone. Proper deployment experience and tactics were all equally important. American pilots quickly adapted. They discovered that the Corsair excelled in what became known as boom and zoom techniques rather than dogfighting. The Corsair could outrun, outclimb, and outdive any Japanese fighter, but couldn't outturn a Zero in slow-speed maneuvers. Maintaining speed and altitude advantage, descending on hostile aircraft, firing, and using superior speed to withdraw before the enemy could react were all part of proper tactics. On May 13, 1943, Second Lieutenant Kenneth A. Walsh of VMF 124 became the first Corsair ace after becoming proficient in these strategies and eventually winning 21 battles. The Corsair's notoriety increased during 1943 and 1944 as the conflict went on. Solomon Islands Marine squadrons flew from hurriedly built Coral Error strips, taking advantage of the aircraft's roughness to disastrous results. Lighter Japanese fighters would have been destroyed by the battle damage that the Corsair was able to withstand. Overwhelming firepower was supplied by its 650 caliber Browning machine guns for inboard guns with 400 rounds each and two outboard guns with 375 rounds each for a total of 2,350 ammunition. Later models, like as the F4U used four 20mm cannons in place of machine guns. However, a lot of pilots favored the 50 caliber weapon's dependability and ammunition capacity. The flexibility of the Corsair went beyond air combat. By the middle of 1944, external ordnance was routinely carried by Corsairs. Bombs, napalm canisters, 8 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, or 1,000-pound centerline and wing racks. The Corsair was incredibly useful for close air support during amphibious operations because of its fighter-bomber capacity. Thankful infantrymen dubbed Corsairs the Angels of Okinawa for their thousands of ground attack sorties during the 1945 Okinawa War. The narrative of the Corsair was not fully revealed by what Japanese pilots experienced during combat. A pilot in the cockpit of a Zero or other Japanese fighter observed a more agile, powerful, and resilient adversary. However, it is necessary to comprehend the technical and production processes that underlie these benefits. Inspection of the aircraft in person. Two facilities were at the heart of Japan's capacity for this kind of technical study: the Army Aviation Technical Research Institute in Tachikawa and the Yokosuka Naval Air Technical Arsenal, which is located south of Tokyo. Throughout the war, these groups have been analyzing captured Allied aircraft, recovering specimens from Pacific battlegrounds. Although the majority of their captures were damaged aircraft or partial wrecks recovered from crash sites, their work had yielded important knowledge about American capabilities. An exceptional opportunity was presented by an intact operating example of an American fighter on the front line. Since its reorganization as the Kaigun Kakusho Naval Air Arsenal on April 1, 1932, the Yokosuka facility of the Japanese Navy had been engaged in technical research. Yokosuka had thousands of engineers, designers, and technicians working for it by World War II. Although Aichi, Nakajima, and Mitsubishi were contracted to produce the actual Japanese Navy aircraft, the arsenal designed a large number of them. Yokosuka's engineers were highly skilled experts with extensive knowledge of aircraft design. One of the most recent American fighters to be recovered in largely undamaged shape was a salvaged Corsair that reached Yokosuka in early 1945. Despite water damage sustained during the forced landing, the aircraft's fundamental structure held up well. Teams for recovery had attempted to save the fighter from sinking completely, and it was taken to the safe technical facility in Yokosuka for inspection. The general state was the main focus of the initial evaluation. A large portion of the Corsair survived submersion in salt water. The airframe structure revealed no signs of war damage, but the enormous Pratt & Whitney engine would need to be completely disassembled and cleaned. This was very important. It was challenging to separate battle damage from design elements in earlier Allied aircraft captures, since the machines were frequently severely damaged. Japanese experts started with methodical measuring and photographing. All dimensions were noted. The wingspan of 40 feet 11.7 inches, length of 33 feet 4 in, 15 feet tall with wings spread out, or 16 feet 2.3 inches tall with wings folded for carrier storage. Attention was drawn right away by the gull's inverted wing shape. Although Japanese designers were aware of the design's structural and aerodynamic benefits, they also acknowledged how difficult it was to manufacture. More advanced machinery and quality control were needed to create the compound curves and maintain exact angles than most Japanese firms could consistently provide at this point in the war. The technical team was especially taken aback by what the examination showed. In spite because of its sophisticated design, the Corsair had fabric covering some of its outer wing surfaces instead of metal. Following the spar and armament bays of the main wing, the rudder, elevators, ailerons, control surfaces, and lower and upper surfaces were all covered with fabric. At first, Japanese aviation experts thought this was confusing. Between 1944 and 1945, a more complex reality was discovered after further investigation. The fabric covering was a purposeful design decision made during the aircraft's 1938 to 1940 development phase. It saved aluminum for important load-bearing components by reducing weight where structural loads were low. The fabric was made of specially treated material that, when used correctly, offered sufficient strength and weatherproofing at a weight that was far lower than that of metal skinning. This demonstrated a sophisticated comprehension of resource allocation for the best. Performance. When the wing structure was disassembled, technical staff discovered construction techniques that were both spectacular and concerning. The crucial structural component supporting flight loads, the main wing spar, was a huge, superbly forged object. Japanese facilities had difficulty matching the strength of the aluminum alloy forgings produced by American metallurgy. The spar size and load-bearing capability were superior to those of similar Japanese fighters. This one element demonstrated a basic distinction. American manufacturing was able to consistently create huge, intricate forgings of high quality. The interior structure of the wing showed a comparable level of intricacy as Japanese manufacturers increasingly depended on built-up structures made from smaller components. Extremely accurate and consistent ribs were stamped from metal sheets. Since each rib was nearly identical to the one after it, strict quality control was used during the production process. As the war went on, Japanese aircraft manufacturing became more and more inconsistent, with individual aircraft displaying differences in component quality. The installation of the Corsair's armaments came into focus. Outstanding firepower was provided by 6 Browning A&M 250 caliber machine guns installed in the wings. The installation was small, dependable, and made to be easily maintained. Japanese examiners were impressed by the systems as well as the weaponry. Completeness. Feed systems, spent cartridge ejection, charging mechanisms, and ammunition boxes were all designed to function in unison. The firearms themselves were examples of expertly crafted weapons. American manufacture of ordnances had attained levels of dependability that the Japanese industry admired. The Browning M2 machine gun was a sophisticated design that had been refined over many years of development and produced in large quantities with remarkable reliability. Japanese technicians who studied these weapons identified production processes and quality requirements that their own companies were unable to reliably meet. Accomplish. Impressions of American design philosophy were strengthened by the discovery of a 1.5-inch thick bulletproof glass panel below the windscreen and 150 pounds of armor plate covering the cockpit. This strategy appeared to be supported by the Zero's early success. However, the absence of protection became lethal as American combatants became more formidable and well-equipped. The Corsair proved that significant defensive armor could be added with good engineering, without compromising functionality, made feasible by the R2800 engine's enormous power. The technical analysis was dominated by that engine. The pinnacle of American aero engine development was the Pratt & Whitney R28000 Twin Wasp. 2 rows of 9 cylinders make up the 18 cylinders, which move 2,800 cubs and generate more than 2,000 horsepower. This engine was a mechanical engineering marvel. Although Japanese engineers had previously seen this engine in airplanes that had been seized, they had never had a reasonably well-maintained specimen for in-depth examination. The development of the engine demonstrated manufacturing capabilities that were nearly unfathomable. Pistons, connecting rods, and cylinders were all expertly manufactured with tolerances expressed in thousandths of an inch. Crankshaft components showed surface, finishes, and dimensional precision that were difficult for Japanese engine builders to attain. The two-stage supercharger system included intricate internal passageways and perfectly matched rotating components in order to sustain power at high altitudes. Due to manufacturing constraints, Japanese attempts to create similar supercharger systems had mostly failed. The engine's dependability and power production were arguably its most remarkable features. Between overhauls, American radial engines frequently maintained their rated horsepower for hundreds of hours. Even brand-new Japanese engines needed regular maintenance and frequently fell short of their theoretical power ratings. Superior metallurgy, improved lubricants, more accurate manufacture, and more advanced quality control were the reasons for the R-280's steady performance. The propeller system was similarly illuminating. With its 13T 4 inches diameter and variable pitch capability, the Hamilton Standard hydrostatic propeller was an example of sophisticated hydraulic control systems and aerodynamic design. Although they lacked manufacturing facilities that could produce huge propellers with the required precision, Japanese engineers were aware of propeller theory. Consistent patterns were found when the aircraft systems were examined. The landing gear system was intricately designed but expertly produced. The instrument panel in the cockpit displayed extensive arrays of accomplishments. Impressions of American design philosophy were strengthened by the discovery of a 1.5-inch thick bulletproof glass panel below the windscreen and 150 pounds of armor plate covering the cockpit. In order to be lighter and more maneuverable, Japanese fighters had mostly given up on extensive armor protection. This strategy appeared to be supported by the Zero's early success. However, the absence of protection became lethal as American combatants became more formidable and well-equipped. The Corsair proved that significant defensive armor could be added with good engineering without compromising functionality. Made feasible by the R-2800 engine's enormous power, the technical analysis was dominated by that engine. Due to wartime shortages, the use of alternative materials has increased. The quality of the aluminum has declined. Expert laborers have been drafted. American airstrikes were a continual menace to factories. Due to production schedules that prioritized quantity above quality, quality control degraded. Japan was on the verge of defeat when the captured Corsair was examined. Japanese cities were being methodically destroyed by American B-29 bombers. At Leyte Gulf, the Navy was destroyed. The Philippines was now free. Okinawa was being attacked, and Uema had fallen. Given this dire situation, the Corsair inspection assumed a solemn meaning. It was a last face-off with technological reality rather than a collection of intelligence for future triumphs. Japanese engineers at Tadakawa and Yokosuka documented their findings in technical reports. These papers provided evaluations of American capabilities, specific measurements, and production practices. Although the tone was formal, it was unable to conceal any hidden meanings. American technology outperformed Japanese capabilities in almost every category that was looked at. The breach wasn't little or simple to seal. It symbolized years of industrial growth, significant tooling and research investments, advanced supply chains, and resources that Japan lacked. Japanese troops had taken control of 2 Corsairs by the end of the war. In August 1945, at the latest, photographs of Corsairs with patched wings and fuselages provide evidence that technical staff restored at least one aircraft to flying condition. Repair attempts show significant efforts to get the aircraft operable for evaluation, but it's unclear if actual flight testing took place. There was a lot of evidence of Japanese technical intelligence activities at Yokosuka Naval Air Technical Arsenal when American occupation forces landed there in September 1945. Allied planes that had been captured were dispersed around the establishment. Japanese attempts to comprehend Allied technology were documented through technical papers, drawings, and pictures American intelligence officers collected. These resources, seeing their importance in comprehending what Japan had discovered. There is more to the Japanese investigation of the F4U Corsair than just technical intelligence. It represents the enormous distance that separates Japanese and American aviation at the end of a war. Japanese pilots and Zero fighters were still able to compete successfully when the Corsair entered battle for the first time in early 1943 with the better tactics and piloting ability. Even seasoned Japanese pilots flying more recent models had little chance against the Corsair's skillful flying by 1945. Unthinkable odds were produced by the aircraft's technological advantages, overwhelming American numerical dominance, and improved pilot training. Against Japanese aircraft, the Corsair's official kill ratio was 11-1. 2,140 were shot down by U.S. Corsair pilots' Japanese aircraft during World War II, while just 189 Corsairs were lost to enemy action. These figures demonstrated the advantages of the entire American war machine, not just the technological superiority of the Corsair. Increased manufacturing capacity, better training, better logistics, and cutting-edge technology everywhere. All of this was understood by Japanese engineers who were inspecting the seized Corsair. They could compute the resource disparities, examine the manufacturing variations, and quantify the performance gap. The findings they reported serve as recognition of Japan's unsuccessful endeavor to equal American industrial power. After World War II, the Corsair itself continued to serve for a very long time. Despite jet fighters taking over air superiority tasks, it demonstrated effectiveness in close air support and ground attack roles throughout the 1950 to 1953 Korean War. Throughout the 1960s, Corsair was flown by foreign air forces, especially France, in colonial battles. During the brief Honduran-El Salvadorian Soccer War in July 1969, Corsair's final combat flights took place. The last combat successes for the type came on July 17, 1969, when Honduran Captain Fernando Sto, piloting an F4U-5, shot down 3 Salvadoran aircraft, including 2 FG-1D Corsairs, ironically accomplished in opposition to other Corsairs. From its initial flight in 1940 to its last combat missions almost 3 decades later, the Corsair emerged as one of the most successful and enduring fighter designs in aviation history. During the American occupation, Japan's experience with the Corsair was a component of a broader face-off with technological realities. In order to restore Japanese industry, Japanese engineers and scientists who had fought against material shortages and industrial constraints throughout the war now collaborated with American occupation authorities. The ideology of post-war Japanese industry was impacted by the lessons gained by studying American technology, such as the Corsair. The hard lessons discovered when Japanese engineers studied current Japanese industry's emphasis on quality, precision manufacturing, and continual improvement, what the American industry was capable of producing. Early in 1945, the recovered Corsair was more than just a downed combatant. It was proof of the superior engineering and advanced manufacture that Japanese aviation had been pursuing during the conflict. The lessons it imparted were too late to alter the course of the conflict. However, they influenced the ensuing peace. Japanese engineers faced the full scope of Japan's challenge when they examined this American fighter. Despite their bravery and expertise, they were unable to overcome their opponent's overwhelming industrial and technological advantages. The narrative concludes with recognition rather than success. Japanese technical reports on the Corsair, found by American occupation forces and currently preserved in archives, act as silent witnesses to a time when the engineers of one country faced the capabilities of another. The Corsair they looked at was probably demolished during the tumultuous post-war era, and it has long since disappeared. However, its legacy endures because of the lessons imparted about the potential of technology, when used appropriately, supported by sufficient funding and advanced production. In the years following the war, Japanese aviation would flourish once more. However, Japanese engineers would never again undervalue what their American colleagues could achieve if they were provided with the resources, scientific know-how, and industrial capability to fully implement their plans. The Japanese technical staff's 1945 analysis of the F4U Corsair stands as a watershed moment, the point, when Japan's aviation establishment understood the gap in technology that had formed throughout the war years. The lesson about the true nature of American industrial power was conveyed more effectively by aluminum alloys, precision forgings, and production tolerances than by propaganda or battle reports.